Chapter 1. Power Outage in Three Pines. The town of Three Pines wasn't on most maps. Tucked into the folds of the Selkirk Mountains, it clung to a lakeshore like it had grown there. Wooden cabins, one gas station, and a community hall that doubled as a school when the roads were clear. It was a place where cell service whispered and the stars still spoke at night. Trevor Lennox drove in under cloud cover, tires crunching the gravel road as a storm threatened above. His coffee had gone cold 2 towns back, and the radio was nothing but static and faint bleed from distant frequencies. He didn't mind. He was used to the quiet. The call had come from someone who didn't give their name. A woman. Calm, measured. She'd said, simply, "Something's showing up during the blackouts. No one remembers it after, but I do. You're the only one who'll listen." Then she hung up. That was 2 nights ago. He parked at the edge of town where the power lines dipped and the air felt heavier. The lake was still, reflecting only a wall of mist that hovered just above the surface. Pines creaked in the wind like old joints. As he stepped out, a man in a Navy windbreaker approached from the shadows of a pop-up trailer. Clean-cut, friendly smile. No name tag. Just a white patch on his jacket with 3 spiral lines etched in silver. "Mr. Lennox?" the man asked. "We heard you might be passing through. Just want you to know, we've got things under control here." Trevor didn't answer. He just looked at the patch. Helix. The man continued. "Locals saw an atmospheric plasma phenomenon. Rare, but explainable. Happens when high-altitude ionization coincides with magnetic troughs. It's already been documented." Trevor looked past him toward the lake, where a temporary satellite dish blinked red atop a mobile command van. "You always deploy this much gear for weather?" he asked. The man smiled, unblinking. "It's all about transparency. People feel better when they have answers." Trevor nodded slightly. "I found the truth works better." The man's smile didn't change. "Sometimes," he said, "the truth needs help." As the man walked away, Trevor stood still. The pine trees swayed gently. A power pole creaked nearby. He looked up at the overcast sky, and for just a second, just long enough to doubt it, a pinprick of light blinked through the clouds. Not a plane, not a star. Something watching. Chapter 2. Too quick to explain. The next morning, Three Pines was dressed in fog. It moved like breath between the trees, curling around eaves and power lines, softening the outlines of homes that hadn't yet woken up. Trevor sat in the corner booth of the only cafe in town, watching the street through the condensation on the window. He stirred his coffee slowly, not because he was thinking, but because he was waiting to. Outside, the Helix vans were already staged again. Their team worked with precision, calm, clean, coordinated. A woman in a branded windbreaker gave instructions to a drone pilot while another crew set up softbox lights near the town sign. Across from Trevor sat a local, mid-30s, ball cap, work jacket, eyes red from lack of sleep. He was the first to reach out after Trevor's quiet arrival the night before. "Look, man, I'm not saying it was aliens or ghosts or any of that," the man said. "I'm just saying I saw something I wasn't supposed to, and now I'm not sure if I saw it at all." Trevor studied him. "You told me the light hovered, that it moved like it was thinking." The man nodded. "Yeah, like it was looking for something. And then? I blacked out. Woke up in my truck with the engine off. Same as 4 other folks that night. Power was still down, but it was quiet. Too quiet." Trevor jotted notes slowly, pen looping in his worn leather journal. The cafe door opened. A Helix rep stepped in. Clipboard, too bright smile, eyes scanning the room. Trevor knew the look. Not searching. Tracking. The local froze. "Hey, maybe I shouldn't talk more." Trevor didn't press, just nodded. The man stood up, mumbled something, and left his half-finished toast behind. A moment later, Trevor's phone buzzed. Unknown sender. One line in the message. They're planting witnesses. Don't trust the girl with the camera. He looked out the window again. There she was, a woman with long blonde hair, holding a camera rig too professional for a sleepy mountain town. She was laughing with a local teenager who now wore a Helix lanyard. Trevor narrowed his eyes. The story was already being told, and he hadn't even asked the first question. Chapter 3. The Interview That Vanishes. That night, the rain returned. Not a downpour, just a steady, needling curtain that softened the world and muffled everything real. Trevor sat in the back seat of his rented SUV, parked on a ridge overlooking the lake. He'd arranged to meet one of the town's high school teachers, Maria Halverson. Early 40s, grounded, not the type to chase lights in the sky. She slid into the front passenger seat, rain dripping from the hood of her jacket. "I don't want to be seen talking to you," she said quietly. Trevor nodded, adjusting the audio recorder on the dashboard. Maria looked out the window, then back at him. "The kids started reporting it last fall. A light during storms. It hovered, didn't blink, didn't move. It just stayed there, like it was listening." She hesitated. "They said it made them feel calm, too calm, like they couldn't move." Trevor clicked on the camera, just an old handheld rig, nothing fancy. "Why haven't you told Helix?" "Because they already told me what I saw," she said. "They came to the school last week with a presentation, called it Magnetoplasmic Reflection Events, had charts, diagrams, told the kids they were just seeing mirrored lightning." "And the kids believed them?" Maria shook her head. "Some, but the ones who saw it the longest, they've stopped talking about it altogether, like the memory's just fading." Trevor leaned back, silently letting the camera roll. Her voice was steady now. She described the tone she heard in her dreams, a pulsing throb that vibrated under the floorboards. Always the same frequency, always just before power failures. She drew a shape on a napkin, not a saucer, not a triangle, just a perfect sphere, with 3 dim lines curling around it in a spiral. As she handed it to Trevor, the cabin lights flickered. Then the power went out. Camera, recorder, interior lights, everything. They sat in complete darkness for 22 seconds. Then, as if nothing had happened, everything blinked back on. Maria gasped, staring at the window. "Did you see that?" Trevor turned, but saw only trees and mist. He handed her a burner phone. "Call me if anything else happens." She nodded and disappeared into the rain. Trevor turned back to the footage. He hit play on the recorder. Nothing. No voice, no image. Just static. Then black. Even the time code was gone. It was like the interview never happened, but the napkin was still in his hand. Chapter 4. A Story Too Clean. By morning, the Helix broadcast was everywhere. Trevor sat on the edge of the motel bed, the TV playing a smooth, polished video on a loop. Drone footage of 3 Pines, washed in golden morning light. A narrator's voice, calm, reassuring, explained how electromagnetic anomalies in mountainous regions could cause misperceptions of light and sound. "Rare," the voice said, "but natural. Nothing to fear." It was all so carefully worded, so confidently false. B-roll showed smiling locals, kids riding bikes, a town wrapped in normalcy. Except it wasn't. Trevor reached for his recorder, still blank from the night before. The footage from Maria Halverson gone. Even the ambient sounds had vanished, overwritten by silence. But the napkin was still real. He unfolded it again, spiral symbol etched in dark ink. It didn't shimmer, didn't change, but it felt wrong, like it had absorbed something, or remembered it. Outside, the town was quiet, too quiet, as if the broadcast had done more than change minds. It had reset the atmosphere, like Helix had injected a memory into the air itself. Trevor stepped outside and walked through town. Everywhere he looked, the same smile greeted him. Locals suddenly less curious, more eager to move on. A woman at the gas station window offered him coffee and said, "Glad they figured it out so quick. Makes you feel better, doesn't it?" Trevor didn't answer, just watched as a Helix agent on the sidewalk handed out flyers. He took one. It showed a diagram of the plasma bloom theory, colorful, convincing, sanitized. It included a QR code linking to public education modules. But what caught Trevor's eye was the small print at the bottom. Brought to you by Helix Public Futures, a subsidiary of Covelis Strategic Media. He knew that name. Covelis had been involved in a 2008 cover-up near Fort Liard, officially labeled a wildfire. Locals had reported luminous shapes above the tree line. A week later, the entire region was deemed recovered and closed to researchers. Trevor folded the flyer. They weren't just managing perception. They were writing reality, and someone wanted him to believe it was real. Chapter 5. Trevor's Doubt. Night fell differently now. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was the feeling that darkness had learned something, that it was no longer passive, but aware. Trevor sat in the modest rental cabin just outside of town, lights off, listening to the raw recordings he'd salvaged from earlier in the week. Most were filled with empty air, long pauses, the occasional shift of movement. But one file, REC 0429/C, was different. At first it was silent. Then came the throb. Not loud, not tonal, just a rhythmic push in the air, like a heartbeat hiding in the static. He slowed the track. The pulse remained. It didn't distort. It didn't warp. It simply became clearer. A frequency he'd heard before, years ago, under different skies, in different forests. Always near the end of a case. Always when the evidence began to disappear. He took out the metal fragment again, his old companion from another case. Still inert. Still cold. Until he placed it near the speaker. Then it warmed. Trevor narrowed his eyes. He scribbled a note in his journal. The signal isn't broadcast. It's tethered. It needs something nearby to echo back. He rose, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped outside into the dark. The woods whispered around him. Pines stretching high into the night. The lake beyond shimmered with just enough moonlight to catch its breath. And there, almost imperceptibly, it appeared. A ripple in the air. Not light, not shadow. Just distortion. For a moment, it hovered near the tree line, silent. Then it blinked out, gone like a memory half-formed. Trevor didn't chase it. He just turned off the flashlight, let his eyes adjust, and waited. Because something in the woods had seen him, and he wanted it to know. He saw it too. Chapter 6. The Symbol in the Woods. The forest was a cathedral. Trevor moved slowly through the pines, flashlight in hand, boots pressing softly into the moss and needles. The air was cold but charged, like it held static from a storm that had never arrived. It was just after 2 a.m. when he reached the clearing. The trees parted into a flat, circular space, where nothing grew. No shrubs, no brush. Just dark soil and the echo of something long buried. The mist hung low here, unmoving, as if reluctant to leave. Then he saw it. At the center of the clearing, carved into stone and burned black around the edges, was a spiral. 3 concentric curves intersected by an angular arc. It wasn't paint. It wasn't scratched. It had been scorched into the rock itself, fresh. Trevor knelt beside it. The flashlight beam flickered. He reached out but stopped short of touching the symbol. The moment hung. Then something stirred. A breeze, small but unnatural, moved through the clearing, bending treetops in no particular direction. Not wind. Something else. Trevor stood, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but the feeling deepened, that he was not alone here, not in the way people usually meant. This place didn't hold presence. It was one. He opened his journal and began sketching the symbol. As he finished, he realized something. The shape wasn't just a spiral. It mirrored the internal structure of certain radio waveforms he'd seen before, ones that looped endlessly when analyzed, a repeating cycle. He underlined it twice. The symbol is not a warning. It's a process. Trevor rose, flashlight aimed low, and backed out of the clearing. As he turned to leave, he paused. Just beyond the edge of the trees, half hidden in the mist, something reflective shimmered. Not an animal. A lens. Watching, then gone. Chapter 7. A glitch in their signal. Trevor watched the lights go out from a hill above town. The Helix mobile tower, always humming, always blinking, suddenly powered down. The blue and white LEDs lining its frame flickered, then went dark. 3 minutes. That's how long the blackout lasted. No power, no comms, no lights in the surrounding homes. And in that silence, the orb returned. Trevor saw it rise just beyond the treetops, hovering silently above the lake. It didn't pulse. It didn't flash. It simply existed. A perfect, silvery sphere that shimmered against the fog as if coated in living mercury. This was no plasma bloom, no magnetic trick. It moved deliberately, gliding above the water's edge, then pausing over the trees near the Helix installation. The stillness grew unbearable. The sound in Trevor's ears vanished. No wind, no breath, not even the blood in his own body. Just the orb. Then, in an instant, the lights returned. The Helix tower rebooted. The generators kicked back on. The street lamps across town blinked to life. And the orb? Gone. Not fled, not faded, deleted. Trevor climbed down the ridge toward the van. He passed 2 Helix agents shouting into radios, trying to figure out what had caused the system's crash. No one else seemed to have seen it. Or maybe no one else remembered. He circled behind the tower and found what he'd hoped for. A data node left unguarded, still logging from the brief blackout. He popped the drive. Later, back in the cabin, he decrypted the backup feed. One of the drone cameras had remained active during the blackout, running on internal battery. The file played without audio, shaky and color distorted, but it captured everything. The orb, the descent, the shimmer against the water, and something else. A pulse. Just before disappearing, the orb released a faint ring of energy, visible only in a single frame. A distortion wave that spread outward and reacted to the metal fragment Trevor had placed on the table beside the computer. It glowed faintly, warm again, alive. Trevor whispered to himself, barely audible, "It's not the signal that matters." He watched the frame again. It's what responds. Chapter 8. The Witness Who Remembers. The next day, Trevor visited the town archives, or what passed for them. A single back room in the library, lined with musty file folders, local newsletters, and curling photo albums from county fairs long past. The librarian, a quiet woman in her 70s, gestured wordlessly when he asked about unusual sightings. In the corner of the room sat a woman in a heavy knit sweater, sketching idly in a worn notebook. She looked up when Trevor entered. He recognized her from a faded news clipping. Margaret Denby, former teacher, now retired, lived alone in the woods west of town. "Looking for ghosts?" she asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Looking for what's been forgotten," Trevor replied. She patted the seat beside her. "Then you might want to see this." Trevor sat. She handed him the sketchbook. Inside, dozens of drawings, some recent, others faded with age. The same orb again and again, sometimes above the forest, sometimes reflected in water, always the same shape, always the same silence. "I saw it when I was 12, she said. "Summer storm knocked the lights out. It floated above the lake like a lantern hung in the sky. My father saw it too, but forgot by morning. I never did." She pointed to a particular sketch, a page yellowed and weathered. The orb hovered above 3 spirals burned into the ground. "That symbol was there in the dirt," she whispered, "and when I touched it, I didn't dream for 3 years." Trevor looked at her. Why draw it now? Margaret hesitated, eyes distant. "Because it's been coming back. Every time someone lies loud enough about it, it gets a little closer." Trevor leaned forward. "Do you know what it wants?" She laughed softly. "I don't think it wants anything." Then her tone shifted. "I think it remembers." Chapter 9. In the Eye of the Drone. Trevor had seen a lot of drones in his line of work. Surveyors, police units, military-grade quadcopters, but none like the ones Helix used. Matte black casings, whisper-silent rotors, redundant optics tucked under sleek housings. Not just tools of observation, tools of erasure. But even the best systems had seams. Trevor waited until midnight, hidden beneath a collapsed tree line on the ridge above the Helix staging zone. One drone passed overhead every 5 minutes. Predictable. The 4th sweep lingered over the lake longer than usual, then pivoted. Its pattern had changed. He followed its path through binoculars, tracking its signal source to a temporary relay hidden inside a mobile antenna pod. Back at the cabin, he unpacked a gray case. Inside, an old Spectrum hijack unit, custom-built. Obsolete to modern networks, but Helix, for all their budget, still ran some of the same protocols Trevor had studied back when they called this kind of work surplus security consulting. He uploaded a handshake spike, and the drone blinked. For 4 minutes, he had access to its internal camera logs. The footage stuttered at first, then smoothed out. Trevor watched the drone's eye sweep across the valley, and then catch something Helix hadn't shown in their official media. The orb. But this time, it wasn't hovering. It was splitting. A duplicate sphere peeled silently from the original, as if it had always been embedded inside. The new orb hovered closer to the drone, then paused, almost regarding it. The feed trembled. Static interference surged across the image. The orb flashed once, and the camera shut down. Trevor rewound, frame by frame. In the instant before the blackout, the orb's reflection appeared in the drone's glass lens, brief, inverted, and surrounded by a ripple of alien glyphs etched in light. Not random. Trevor froze the frame. The glyphs matched one of Margaret Denby's sketches. These things weren't just appearing. They were responding. To memory, to attention, to belief. Chapter 10. The Misdirection Machine. Trevor had seen disinformation before, but this was something different. He sat alone in a booth at a gas station cafe 2 towns over, watching the Helix live stream on his tablet. Smooth graphics. Testimonials from hand-picked locals. Drone shots over the valley with gentle piano music beneath a carefully worded narration. What residents saw, the voice said, was a rare, beautiful phenomenon. A glimpse into the natural mysteries of the Earth's magnetic field. Thanks to Helix, we now understand these luminous events, and no one needs to be afraid. But Trevor recognized one of the people in the footage, a young man he'd spoken to 3 nights ago. Back then, the kid had said, it wasn't lightning, it was watching us. Now he smiled at the camera and said, it was kind of magical, like the Northern Lights, but better. Trevor rewound, froze the frame. The smile didn't reach the eyes. He zoomed in, subtle but unmistakable. The same Helix spiral watermark, digitally pulsing in the corner of the frame. It was embedded in the skin tone itself. A manipulation layer. Not deepfake, but worse. They were staging reality, not just shaping memory, fabricating the story before it happened. And worse, he was starting to suspect that some of the anomalies, the lights, the symbols, even certain witnesses, were being manufactured by Helix to drown the real phenomenon beneath a tidal wave of noise, flood the world with false signals, make the real one harder to hear. Trevor opened a second browser window and pulled up satellite frequency logs. Over the last 48 hours, Helix had deployed 5 high-frequency modulation bursts across southern British Columbia, under the guise of emergency network diagnostics. The bursts corresponded precisely with reported sightings. He highlighted the pattern, saved the file, wrote a single note. Controlled phenomena. The cover story becomes the camouflage. That night, he returned to the clearing. The symbol was still burned into the rock, but now, standing beside it, was a polished black tripod, an active Helix sensor drone. Recording, not the sky, the memory of the place. Chapter 11. Static in the blood. It started with a buzz in his teeth. Trevor woke before sunrise in the cabin, a cold sweat soaking the back of his shirt. The old metal fragment, the one he always kept in a felt pouch tucked inside his coat, was lying on the floor beside his bed, humming softly. He hadn't touched it, hadn't removed it, and yet there it was. He leaned forward to examine it, and as his fingers neared the edge, a pulse of static cracked through the air. Not painful, just invasive, like it moved through him instead of over him. He grabbed his recorder and held it near. The device flickered, then died. The hum continued. Minutes later, someone knocked at the door. 2 Helix reps. Identical windbreakers. Calm smiles. One carried a folder, the other a small biometric scanner. "Just a quick health check," one said. "Standard after high EM exposure in the region." Trevor didn't protest. He let them inside, let them take the sample, just a drop of blood. They asked no questions, left no paperwork, and disappeared before the kettle even started boiling. 2 hours later, the hum stopped. He powered the recorder back on. It was dead. Permanently. So he tried something else. He opened the notebook of glyphs he'd been collecting, sketches from Margaret, symbols from the drone video, fragments from Clearwater and Arizona and Fort Liard. The patterns weren't random. When he laid them out on the floor, a structure emerged. Spirals connecting to waves, curves linking to fields of dots. A kind of language, not verbal, not even mathematical, but biological. Trevor felt the metal fragment warm in his pocket. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but recognition, like something buried in him had been activated. He wrote one line in his journal. "It's not a signal they're sending. It's one they're waking up." Outside, a helicopter passed overhead. Low, slow, unmarked. But Trevor already knew who sent it. Chapter 12. Signal Reboot. The storm rolled in at midnight. Thunder curled around the mountains like a slow exhale, distant but deliberate. Trevor sat alone in the cabin, lights off, watching the window. The spiral patterns on the floor had long since faded, but he could still feel them, as if they'd imprinted on the room. He placed the fragment on the table beside the recorder, both untouched for hours. Then it began. The radio, unplugged, clicked on. At first, just static. Then the pulse. That familiar low thrum, ancient, patient, deeper than sound. It rolled through the cabin like a presence returning to something it once owned. Trevor moved slowly, placing the fragment near the recorder. The machine powered itself, its display flickering with green light. He hit record. Outside, the storm broke. Lightning arced above the treetops, casting flickers of the forest in negative. For a second, something hovered at the edge of the trees, round, silent, the orb. But it was different this time. It wasn't floating. It was waiting. Trevor stepped onto the porch, rain misting his face. The orb hovered 20 feet from the tree line, barely 3 meters off the ground. It rotated slowly. No sound, no propulsion, just motion, watching. Then, something impossible. The recorder began to play forward, not the tone it captured, but a new one, higher, more intricate, like a chord bending around itself. And with each pulse, Trevor's thoughts shifted, not from memory, but from something deeper. Recognition. He saw moments that hadn't happened. Margaret as a girl, standing by the lake. Aaron Cray, holding a metal fragment inside a concrete bunker. A spiral carved into snow in a place Trevor had never been. Each one fleeting. Each one pulsing with a sense of unfinished purpose. The orb blinked once, then vanished. No flash. No sound. Just gone. The storm broke apart within seconds. The recorder powered down. Trevor stood motionless, not afraid, but changed. He looked down at the notebook. One final glyph had appeared on the open page. Not written. Impressed. As if something had pushed it into the fibers of the paper. It wasn't one he recognized, but it felt like a name. And it was his. Chapter 13. The spiral deepens. Trevor left 3 Pines before dawn. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a message. Just drove west, away from the lake, away from the burned symbol, away from whatever had arrived, and whatever had been waiting. But something came with him, not in the trunk, not in the air. Inside, a weight behind the eyes, a tone beneath the silence, like a pressure that hadn't lifted, just shifted position. The feeling that you were still being watched, but not from outside, from within. The highway curved through valleys still wrapped in fog. He passed another small town around noon, and there, on the community center wall, was a freshly posted flyer. Helix Public Futures Understanding Anomalous Aerial Light Phenomena. Free seminar. Learn the science. Release the fear. Trevor didn't stop. He passed another van an hour later. White, clean. Spiral emblem on the side. The driver smiled as they passed. A knowing smile. One that said, "We know you saw it, and we don't need to stop you." Because Helix wasn't chasing him. They were herding, directing attention, shaping narrative, isolating anomalies, turning true things into ridiculous things until no one dared believe any of it again. Back in his notebook, Trevor flipped to the last page. The pressed glyph was still there. Clean, indented, familiar now. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew what it felt like. Ownership, not from them, from it. The orb, the signal, whatever lived behind the mask of light. He stopped at a rest station and looked up. The sky was clear, empty, but he knew the pattern was still unfolding, not just in the air, in the cities, in the stories, in the minds of the people who still dared to notice. Trevor wrote one final line beneath the glyph. They don't need to silence the truth. They just need to bury it under a better story. He shut the notebook, started the engine, and drove on.